a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Star Trek. Star Trek is an American media franchise based on the science fiction television series created by Gene Roddenberry. The first television series, simply called Star Trek and now referred to as the original series, debuted in 1966 and aired for 3 seasons on the television network NBC. It followed the interstellar adventures of Captain James T. Kirk and his crew aboard the starship USS Enterprise, a space exploration vessel built by the United Federation of Planets in the 23rd century. The Star Trek canon of the franchise includes the original series, an animated series, 5 spin-off television series, the film franchise, and further adaptations in several media. In creating Star Trek, Roddenberry was inspired by the Horatio Hornblower novels, the satirical book Gulliver's Travels, and by works of Western genre such as the television series Wagon Train. These adventures continued in the short-lived Star Trek, the animated series, and 6 feature films. 4 spin-off television series were eventually produced. Star Trek: The Next Generation followed the crew of a new starship Enterprise set a century after the original series. Star Trek: Deep Space Nine and Star Trek: Voyager set contemporaneously with The Next Generation, and Star Trek: Enterprise set before the original series in the early days of human interstellar travel. The most recent Star Trek TV series, entitled Star Trek: Discovery, premiered on CBS and later made available exclusively on the digital platform CBS All Access. The adventures of the Next Generation crew continued in 4 additional feature films. In 2009, the film franchise underwent a reboot, set in an alternate timeline, or Kelvin timeline, entitled simply Star Trek. This film featured a new cast portraying younger versions of the crew from the original show. Their adventures were continued in the sequel film, Star Trek Into Darkness. The 13th film feature and sequel, Star Trek Beyond, was released to coincide with the franchise's 50th anniversary. Star Trek has been a cult phenomenon for decades. Fans of the franchise are called Trekkies or Trekkers. The franchise spans a wide range of spin-offs including games, figurines, novels, toys, and comics. Star Trek had a themed attraction in Las Vegas that opened in 1998 and closed in September 2008. At least 2 museum exhibits of props travel the world. The series has its own full-fledged constructed language, Klingon. Several parodies have been made of Star Trek. In addition, viewers have produced several fan productions. As of July 2016, the franchise had generated $10 billion in revenue, making Star Trek one of the highest-grossing media franchises of all time. Star Trek is noted for its cultural influence beyond works of science fiction. The franchise is also noted for its progressive civil rights stances. The original series included one of television's first multiracial casts. Star Trek references may be found throughout popular culture, from movies such as the submarine thriller Crimson Tide to the animated series South Park. Conception and setting. As early as 1964, Gene Roddenberry drafted a proposal for the science fiction series that would become Star Trek. Although he publicly marketed it as a western in outer space, a so-called Wagon Train to the stars, he privately told friends that he was modeling it on Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels, intending each episode to act on 2 levels: as a suspenseful adventure story and as a morality tale. Most Star Trek stories depict the adventures of humans and aliens who serve in Starfleet, the spaceborne humanitarian and peacekeeping armada of the United Federation of Planets. The protagonists have altruistic values, and must apply these ideals to difficult dilemmas. Many of the conflicts and political dimensions of Star Trek represent allegories of contemporary cultural realities. Star Trek: The original series addressed issues of the 1960s, just as later spin-offs have reflected issues of their respective decades. Issues depicted in the various series include war and peace, the value of personal loyalty, authoritarianism, imperialism, class warfare, economics, racism, religion, human rights, sexism, feminism, and the role of technology. Roddenberry stated, "By creating a new world with new rules, I could make statements about sex, religion, Vietnam, politics, and intercontinental missiles. Indeed, we did make them on Star Trek." We were sending messages and fortunately they all got by the network. If you talked about purple people on a far-off planet, they never really caught on. They were more concerned about cleavage. They actually would send a sensor down to the set to measure a woman's cleavage to make sure too much of her breast wasn't showing. Roddenberry intended the show to have a progressive political agenda reflective of the emerging counterculture of the youth movement, though he was not fully forthcoming to the networks about this. He wanted Star Trek to show humanity what it might develop into, if it would learn from the lessons of the past, most specifically by ending violence. An extreme example is the alien species, the Vulcans, who had a violent past, but learned to control their emotions. Roddenberry also gave Star Trek an anti-war message, and depicted the United Federation of Planets as an ideal, optimistic version of the United Nations. His efforts were opposed by the network, because of concerns over marketability, and more. They opposed Roddenberry's insistence that Enterprise have a racially diverse crew. Mythology. The central trio of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy from Star Trek, the original series, was modeled on classical mythological storytelling. William Shatner said, "There is a mythological component to pop culture, especially with science fiction. It's people looking for answers, and science fiction offers to explain the inexplicable, the same as religion tends to do. If we accept the premise that it is a mythological element, then all the stuff about going out into space and meeting new life, trying to explain it and put a human element to it, it's a hopeful vision. All these things offer hope and imaginative solutions for the future." Richard Lutz wrote, "The enduring popularity of Star Trek is due to the underlying mythology which binds fans together. By virtue of their shared love of stories involving exploration, discovery, adventure and friendship that promote an egalitarian and peace-loving society where technology and diversity are valued rather than feared and citizens work together for the greater good. Thus Star Trek offers a hopeful vision of the future and a template for our lives and our society that we can aspire to." Beginnings. In early 1964, Roddenberry presented a brief treatment for a proposed Star Trek TV series to Desilu Productions, comparing it to Wagon Train. A Wagon Train to the Stars. Desilu worked with Roddenberry to develop the treatment into a script, which was then pitched to NBC. NBC paid to make a pilot, The Cage, starring Jeffrey Hunter as Enterprise Captain Christopher Pike. NBC rejected The Cage, but the executives were still impressed with the concept, and made the unusual decision to commission a second pilot, Where No Man Has Gone Before. The first regular episode of Star Trek, the original series, aired on Thursday, September 8, 1966 in the US. While the show initially enjoyed high ratings, the average rating of the show at the end of its first season dropped to 52nd out of 94 programs. Unhappy with the show's ratings, NBC threatened to cancel the show during its second season. The show's fan base, led by Joe Trimble, conducted an unprecedented letter-writing campaign, petitioning the network to keep the show on the air. NBC renewed the show, but moved it from primetime to the Friday night death slot, and substantially reduced its budget. In protest, Roddenberry resigned as producer, and reduced his direct involvement in Star Trek, which led to Fred Freiberger becoming producer for the show's third and final season. Despite another letter-writing campaign, NBC cancelled the series after 3 seasons and 79 episodes. Rebirth. After the original series was cancelled, Paramount Studios, which had bought the series from Desilu, licensed the broadcast syndication rights to help recoup the production losses. Reruns began in the fall of 1969, and by the late 1970s the series aired in over 150 domestic and 60 international markets. This helped Star Trek develop a cult following greater than its popularity during its original run. One sign of the series' growing popularity was the first Star Trek convention, which occurred on January 21-23, 1972 in New York City. Although the original estimate of attendees was only a few hundred, several thousand fans turned up. Star Trek fans continue to attend similar conventions worldwide. The series' newfound success led to the idea of reviving the franchise. Filmation, with Paramount Television, produced the first post-original series show, Star Trek, the animated series. It ran on NBC for 22 half-hour episodes, over 2 seasons on Saturday mornings from 1973 to 1974. although short-lived, typical for animated productions in that time slot. During that period, the series garnered the franchise's only Best Series Emmy Award as opposed to the franchise's later technical ones. Paramount Pictures and Roddenberry began developing a new series, Star Trek, Phase 2, in May 1975 in response to the franchise's newfound popularity. Work on the series ended, however, when the proposed Paramount television service folded. Following the success of the science fiction movies Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Paramount adapted the planned pilot episode of Phase 2 into the feature film Star Trek, the motion picture. The film opened in North America on December 7, 1979, with mixed reviews from critics. The film earned $139 million worldwide, below expectations, but enough for Paramount to create a sequel. The studio forced Roddenberry to relinquish creative control of future sequels. The success of the critically acclaimed sequel, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, reversed the fortunes of the franchise. While the sequel grossed less than the first movie, The Wrath of Khan's lower production costs made it net more profit. Paramount produced 6 Star Trek feature films between 1979 and 1991. In response to the popularity of Star Trek feature films, the franchise returned to television with Star Trek: The Next Generation in 1987. Paramount chose to distribute it as a first-run syndication show rather than a network show. After Roddenberry. Following Star Trek, the motion picture, Roddenberry's role was changed from producer to creative consultant with minimal input to the films while being heavily involved with the creation of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Roddenberry died on October 24, 1991, giving executive producer Rick Berman control of the franchise. Star Trek had become known to those within Paramount as the franchise because of its great success and recurring role as a tentpole for the studio when other projects failed. TNG had the highest ratings of any Star Trek series and became the syndicated show during the last years of its original 7-season run. In response to TNG's success, Paramount released a spin-off series, Deep Space Nine, in 1993. While never as popular as TNG, the series had sufficient ratings for it to last 7 seasons. In January 1995, a few months after TNG ended, Paramount released a 4th TV series, Voyager. Star Trek saturation reached a peak in the mid-1990s with DS9 and Voyager airing concurrently, and 3 of the 4 TNG-based feature films released in 1994, 1996, and 1998. By 1998, Star Trek was Paramount's most important property. The enormous profits of the franchise funded much of the rest of the studio's operations. Voyager became the flagship show of the new United Paramount Network and thus the first major network Star Trek series since the original. After Voyager ended, UPN produced Enterprise, a prequel TV series to the original show. Enterprise did not enjoy the high ratings of its predecessors and UPN threatened to cancel it after the series' 3rd season. Fans launched a campaign reminiscent of the one that saved the 3rd season of the original series. Paramount renewed Enterprise for a 4th season, but moved it to the Friday night death slot. Like the original series, Enterprise ratings dropped during this time slot, and UPN cancelled Enterprise at the end of its 4th season. Enterprise aired its final episode on May 13, 2005. Fan groups, Save Enterprise, attempted to save the series and try to raise $30 million to privately finance a 5th season of Enterprise. Though the effort garnered considerable press, the fan drive failed to save the series. The cancellation of Enterprise ended an 18-year continuous production run of Star Trek programming on television. The poor box office performance in 2002 of the film Nemesis cast an uncertain light upon the future of the franchise. Paramount relieved Berman, the franchise producer, of control of Star Trek. Reboot. Paramount turned down several proposals in the mid-2000s to restart the franchise. These included pitches from film director Bryan Singer, Babylon 5 creator J. Michael Straczynski, and Trek actors Jonathan Frakes and William Shatner. The studio also turned down an animated web series. Instead, Paramount hired a new creative team to reinvigorate the franchise in 2007. Writers Roberto Orci and Alex Kurtzman and Lost producer J.J. Abrams had the freedom to reinvent the feel of Trek. The team created the franchise's 11th film, entitled simply Star Trek, releasing it in May 2009. The film featured a new cast portraying the crew of the original show. Star Trek was a prequel of the original series set in an alternate timeline, known as the Kelvin timeline. This gave the film and future sequels to it freedom from the need to conform to the franchise's canonical timeline. The 11th Star Trek film's marketing campaign targeted non-fans, even stating in the film's advertisements that, "This is not your father's Star Trek." The film earned considerable critical and financial success, grossing more box office sales than any previous Star Trek film. The plaudits include the franchise's first Academy Award. The film's major cast members are contracted for 2 sequels. Paramount's sequel to the 2009 film, Star Trek Into Darkness, premiered in Sydney, Australia, on April 23, 2013, but the film did not release in the United States until May 17, 2013. While the film was not as successful in the North American box office as its predecessor, internationally, in terms of box office receipts, Into Darkness was the most successful of the franchise. A 13th film entitled Star Trek Beyond was released on July 22, 2016. The franchise returned to the small screen in the show Star Trek Discovery. CBS announced a new premiere date of September 24, 2017, and that the season would be split into 2 chapters, with the first chapter consisting of 8 episodes and being released through November 2017, and the second comprising the remaining 7 episodes and beginning streaming in January 2018. This break gave more time to complete post-production on the second half of the season. Television series. 7 television series make up the bulk of the Star Trek mythos: the original series, the animated series, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and Discovery. All the different versions in total amount to 741 Star Trek episodes across the 31 seasons of the TV series. The original series, 1966-69. Star Trek, the original series or TOS, debuted in the United States on NBC on September 8, 1966. The show tells the tale of the crew of the starship Enterprise and its 5-year mission to boldly go where no man has gone before. The original 1966-69 television series featured William Shatner as Captain James T. Kirk, Leonard Nimoy as Spock, DeForest Kelley as Dr. Leonard Bones McCoy, James Doohan as Montgomery, Scott, Nichelle Nichols as Uhura, George Takei as Hikaru Sulu, and Walter Koenig as Pavel Chekhov. During the series' original run, it earned several nominations for the Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation, and won twice, for the 2-parter, The Menagerie, and the Harlan Ellison-written episode, The City on the Edge of Forever. NBC cancelled the show after 3 seasons. The last original episode aired on June 3, 1969. The petition near the end of the 2nd season, to save the show, signed by many Caltech students and its multiple Hugo nominations, would, however, indicate that despite low Nielsen ratings, it was highly popular with science fiction fans and engineering students. The series later became popular in reruns and found a cult following. The animated series, 1973-74. Star Trek, the animated series, produced by Filmation, ran for 2 seasons from 1973 to 1974. Most of the original cast performed the voices of their characters from the original series, and many of the writers who worked on the original series, D.C. Fontana, David Gerrold, and Paul Schneider, wrote for the series. While the animated format allowed the producers to create more exotic alien landscapes and life forms, animation errors and liberal reuse of shots and musical cues have tarnished the series' reputation. Although it was originally sanctioned by Paramount, which owned the Star Trek franchise following its acquisition of DeSillo in 1967, Gene Roddenberry often spoke of TAS as non-canon. Star Trek writers have used elements of the animated series in later live-action series and films, and TAS has references in the library section of the official StarTrek.com website, officially bringing the series into the franchise's main canon. The animated series won Star Trek's first Emmy Award on May 15, 1975. Star Trek, TAS briefly returned to television in the mid-1980s on the children's cable network Nickelodeon. Nickelodeon's Evan Maguire greatly admired the show, and used its various creative components as inspiration for his short series called Piggly Wiggly Here's a Sound, which never aired. Nickelodeon parent Viacom would purchase Paramount in 1994. In the early 1990s, the Sci-Fi Channel also began rerunning TAS. The complete TAS was also released on Laserdisc format during the 1980s. The complete series was first released in the US on 11 volumes of VHS tapes in 1989. All 22 episodes were released on DVD in 2006. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?